Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Hardcover Hooligans, An Unexpected Journey. Well, that's the other one. I guess that is not the right book, but whatever. We're today.
That's the last one.
My name is Mac. As always, with me is Danylo. Danylo, classically, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Do you also despise allegory in all its forms?
Yes.
Yeah? Why?
It's because it's usually dumb.
Yeah.
When someone tells you, you're like, oh, I wasn't reading a story. I was reading someone's weird opinions.
Yep. You and Tolkien have a lot to talk about then, because he feels the exact same way.
It's like when you find out The Wizard of Oz is an allegory for like capitalism or whatever, and you're like, what are we doing here?
I think stories should just be the words on the page, and I don't have to think about them at all past that.
Themes are for 8th grade book reports, I believe, is the...
Yes. Unless I have to be asked to write down what the theme is, I don't really care. I don't really give a fuck. That's just kind of reader I am. Okay, so today we are reading The Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, the first half of the Fellowship of the Ring, written by one J.R.R. Tolkien, published on July 29th, 1954 in the United Kingdom, but then published in, I have it here, October 21st, 1954 in the United States. I have read this book before. I love this book a lot. Danylo, you've never read this book before.
No, I have not.
And first, immediate thoughts based on... we stopped right before the Council of Elrond. So we've made it to Rivendell, but that's it. So Danylo, what do you think of what we've read so far?
So I've seen the movies multiple times and generally really liked them and was into them. I went into this book with certain expectations based on the movie, and also just like based on knowing in certain ways how they're different from the movie. And I have to say, I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. I was very surprised.
Really?
I really liked it. I was bummed I had to stop.
Oh, nice. Good. Thank God you said that, or else we'd have to end the podcast forever, I think. What were you, what particularly surprised you? Like, what weren't you expecting that you really enjoyed?
I think like the tone of it, like I was like, oh, this isn't trying to be an action movie.
No, it's so different.
And I really, like, once I sort of was like, oh, okay, I really enjoyed it. And like this might not be a hot take, but like I don't know, I've read The Hobbit. J.R.R. Tolkien's kind of a good writer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's so... A lot of times, I feel like in the cultural imaginary, people are like, oh, The Lord of the Rings, it's like flowery. It's really not.
Or I expect it to be like pulpier or more like The Hobbit. But like there were like the descriptions of nature are just like amazing. Like I was all in on it, and he like described the sun on different days, and I'm like, hell yeah.
Yeah,
that
I
was
think
great.
that's awesome.
I
And I think there's
great.
a definite, people, I think we talked about this in The Hobbit a little bit. People talk about this book like a little bit of the beginning is like Hobbit 1.5. And I think there's a definite tone switch right after the House of Tom Bombadil with the literal like zombie ghost scene that is like, whoa, like this feels a lot. Imagine if that happened to Bilbo Baggins. Like that's a way different book. That's like an actual scary part, which I really love.
Or just like the line of, when they left the Shire, it's like immediately a different world.
Yeah.
And that like only really happens through like the descriptions of their like environment. I guess I didn't expect to be like, I don't know, from like the movies, my feelings about Middle Earth are like, oh, it's a generic fantasy setting. But like the way it's written here, I'm like, oh, I get why people like Middle Earth.
Yeah.
Like it feels much more specific and evocative, like in the book.
Yeah, the parts that are untamed, if you will, of Middle Earth really feel like fucking anything. Like the ground could just suddenly like stand up and punch you in the head. Like it feels like truly alien.
And I like the Hobbits a lot more. Like,
yeah, they're awesome.
They're they're like, I don't know, like real and specific. They're not, because I always watch the movies. I'm like, oh, this is an action movie. It's too bad the main characters are these like dumb, naive idiots.
Yeah, I think the movie, I mean, obviously the biggest switch from page to screen is Merry and Pippin, and not only like their involvement in the story, but also like their general level of intelligence and aptitude.
Oh yeah.
And Sam is also different, but that's not, we don't see how Sam is different yet, but he will also be different. But Merry and Pippin, man, I love them in this book a lot, and
I hate them in the movie now.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's very different. Their introduction to the story in the movie, as compared to the book, I've always been like, how come that's different? Like, why can't they just be along for the ride on purpose?
Weird comic relief, because that's like all they are in the movies. But like, I'm reading and I'm like, oh, they're like nice and smart, and they're like good friends with them, not just like randos who are like, bah, what about second breakfast?
Right.
And everyone's like, oh, you hobbits.
Yeah, they really care.
Mary was like, I'll meet you here and I'll be there and we'll like band together and hey, let's do this. And, they have like plans. They can like get around by themselves. They're not like, I think the movie portrayed them as like big children, which I think that's what bothered me about them. But like reading the book, I'm like, oh, I get why people like hobbits now.
Oh, yeah. And I think Frodo catches a lot of flack for being annoying in the movie, but he's like he's not in the book, I don't think. In any of them, I don't think he's annoying. And I think like because you're with him a lot, it's like later in the books as the ring is slowly starting to like make him go crazy. What in the movie I think can be a little bit, he can maybe be like a bit of a whiner. In the books, it's like really like unsettling. Like, I cannot believe he's treating Sam like this. Sam has been with him this whole time.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think, I found like tone things where like, oh, I see how they got it onto the screen that way, but like tone wise, I can see how it's challenging to portray the hobbits in a certain way when you're trying to like make an action movie, basically.
Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff. I can see how that'd be missed in translation because they have to do what they have to do to keep the movie moving forward. Whereas like a lot of the stuff that makes you like the hobbits in the book is like stuff that would be cut out of a movie. Like, when they just talk about how much they like elves, or like when they eat breakfast.
There ain't no Gildor and Glorion scene in the movie. Hell no.
Or Glorfindel.
Yeah, Glorfindel replaced with Arwen, a character who shows up again, unlike Glorfindel. So maybe that was a good choice. But anyway, maybe we should dive right in. What do you think about that, Danilo?
Let's do it.
I don't know. It's okay if you did not, but did you read the foreword to the second edition? Because I do want to talk about that a little bit.
About like the allegory about it, like the war and all that stuff.
So this is, a lot of people argue, and I'm not going to give my opinion on it right now, but a lot of people argue, like, or feel pretty strongly that The Lord of the Rings is a direct allegory to, like, the rise of, World War II, and also the rise of Germany both times, which is, and this might come as a surprise to you people who don't own maps, to the east of where J.R.R. Tolkien lives. And a lot of, in this book, evil is like rising from the east, because in the southeast is Mordor, and that's where they're going.
The southeast of England is Germany.
Yes, exactly. And you can map on, like the armies of man versus the armies of orc, good versus evil, and people attribute this as an allegory to World War II, like I said, and also with the ring being a symbol for greed, like the greed of man in general. And Tolkien is pretty like stoutly against this, and it all comes from this, which is the foreword to the second edition. Specifically, he has a problem with, I guess this is technically reaching a little further ahead, and we can talk about it when we're actually done with Return of the King, but he says that it can't be an allegory. A big part of it is because of how the whole thing wraps up. He talks about, like, if it was really an allegory, then Barad-dûr wouldn't have been destroyed, it would be occupied, and, like, the hobbits would be blamed for fucking everything because they brought it there. And it's like, sure, I guess, but to me, it's very obvious with the relationship. The story is just about men. There's like 2 women in the whole book, and I think that's because Tolkien is writing about his experiences losing his innocence with a bunch of his fellow countrymen in war. Danilo, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think I haven't read the rest of the books, but
you know what happens. No big differences. You get it.
But I think it can be a product of its time, without being an allegory, and like a product of a human being's experiences in things that happen in his life that happen to be world events, and like still be about those things. But like, I'm surprised that people do put such a heavy like allegory thing on it, because like even just reading it didn't really feel like that, because I grew up, we talked a little bit about this last time with J.R.R. Tolkien being like big Catholic dude, and growing up in Catholic church, and then being like, oh yeah, the Lord of the Rings is a Catholic story. Sauron is the devil, the ring is sin, and Frodo is tempted by sin, and it's about overcoming, the devil's temptation to sin and stuff, which I think is a valid interpretation, potentially. Yeah. But like, that is also as valid as, oh, it's about World War II. It has that emotional, like, I don't know, level to it, but it's not, I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I do know what you're saying.
It's like, I was surprised by how much it felt like it's a fairy tale with certain elements about like humanity and people doing things and good and evil and friendship and stuff. And then anything about the world and your experience, you can sort of map onto it, like what it means. Like, what does the ring tempting you mean? Like, it's sort of, I don't know.
Yeah, I think he says that like there's a difference between history and allegory, and like, okay, I guess we gotta talk about this. Technically, The Lord of the Rings is like a frame story written by the hobbits in a book called The Red Book of Westmarch, and it's supposed to be like a history, not like a piece of history started by Bilbo Baggins, finished by Frodo, then finished by Sam, and then put in a museum. And like Tolkien, I don't know, like found it or whatever.
Well, I think it's like saying, Song of Ice and Fire is an allegory of the War of the Roses,
Yes,
like it's I don't know what does that get you? Like the story is like more than that. There's different things in there. Like, yeah, sure, it's inspired by this historical event, but ultimately it's a different thing trying to tell its own story.
Yeah.
Not that J.R.R. Tolkien or fucking George R.R. Martin, George Railroad Martin is trying to talk about his trauma from the War of the Roses, because I don't think he was that old. But
right, no, I would hope he's not that old.
He'd be done with the books already.
But yeah, heyo, burn him, chalk one up in the in the L column for George Railroad Martin. Yeah, I think that's all true. I think he would be I think even suggesting like you are sort of writing about yourself and your loss of innocence, he would rail against that idea. And I think even as the books go on, like, that is really obviously what's happening. Like, there's not to get ahead of ourselves, but there's a moment in the second book where they see the Rangers kill an Easterling, and then he like looks different. He has darker skin, and there's literally a moment where Sam is like, but he's just a person like all of us, and we're just like killing each other, and like, what's the point? And it's like, come on, man, come on, you're obviously dealing with your own death of the author or whatever, but come on, give me a break.
Well, like, all books, fantasy or otherwise, that include war end up being about war,
Yeah.
And like people's experiences during war. So like, then of course everyone's going to think about, the wars that have happened in relationship to this book that has war in it. And so, what can you do?
Well, I guess we should start. On that note, let's start with the prologue. Danilo,
oh boy.
We were hanging out. We were doing something together, and I noticed you were reading the prologue. And you told me at the time you were struggling to get through it. Now, how come? Is that because you were bored learning about pipeweed?
I immediately remembered why I've never read this book before. Because I don't know if you've ever been, about to get in your car on a road trip,
right?
And you're really excited on this road trip, and you pull out of your driveway and you start driving, and you turn a corner, and someone's built a brick wall in the middle of the road, and you crash right into it. And that's sort of how I felt in this prologue.
Yeah. Which
I'm
I
not
understand.
gonna lie, I skimmed some of it. I tried to find some of it interesting, but I'm like, I have nothing to like hang this on. Like, this is not related to anything. Like, I'm glad I read The Hobbit, because I think there's previous times I tried to read this book where I hadn't even read The Hobbit, and then I tried reading this. I'm like, what the fuck's going on?
Yeah. Well, this is just something I got to get off my chest here. A lot of people joke that pipe weed is like weed. It's not. It's nicotania, which is tobacco in Lord of the Rings. So shut the fuck up. If you think it's weed, you're a fucking moron.
I mean, probably Led Zeppelin thought it was weed, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Songs all
over
over
the hills and far away, brother. All right. So I guess we start at the beginning then. That's really it. It's just, if you didn't read The Hobbit, it summarizes The Hobbit. That is the purpose of the prologue. And also you get to learn about how the Shire's police work, which is interesting.
I put that. Here, for those of you who haven't read this, I think you can skip it and then reread it after you've read these books. So this is very important. The Thane was the master of the Shire Moot, and the captain of the Shire Muster and the Hobbitry in arms. But as muster and moot were only held in times of emergency, which no longer occurred, the thaneship had ceased to be more than a nominal dignity. So, just keep that in your head.
Yeah, that's really important.
It's very important.
Danylo, do you remember how old Bilbo Baggins is turning?
32, right?
No, that's Bilbo.
Oh no, Bilbo, 11.
Yes, his 11th birthday is upon us, ladies and gentlemen. And it's a big deal. He's got fucking fireworks. He's got a bunch of dwarves are constantly coming to visit. And Bilbo has attained a sort of... He's like the craziest, richest person of all time. Which I love. I love how everybody thinks Bilbo is like a freak and is like, Frodo's gotta stop hanging out with his creepy uncle. I think
he's like just mildly quirky. Like he'll occasionally have like a guest from out of town, or like he'll tell a story, and everyone's like, stay away from that guy.
Yep. Yeah. So Bilbo is celebrating his birthday. There's a lot of invitations to be sent. And everybody's invited, even people he doesn't like, because Bilbo's going to do a big ruse at his birthday party. He's just going to move out in the middle of his birthday party. He's skipping town. And he gives a big funny speech that is almost word for word what it is in the movie. I like half of you as much as you like or deserve or what have you. And then a big firework explosion goes off, and then boom, he vanishes. Danylo, would you just keep partying if the host like exploded?
Probably.
I like Frodo's reaction to this, where he's just like, okay, he just like keeps drinking. All right,
it's funny because like no one knows what to do about it. It's like, okay, old man, we'll listen to your little speech.
And they hate it. Like hobbits hate the speeches unless they're about like keep drinking. They're like here. Which I always love.
They didn't when there's too many words. They're like, what?
And then Bilbo goes back to... Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I know we didn't... we mentioned this before, but I love how they brought up the "thank you very much."
Yes.
Again.
Yeah.
I laughed out loud. I don't know why. I think that's so funny, because it's like so dumb.
It's real, though. Like, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So he goes back... Bilbo goes back and he's like, well, I'm leaving. And Gandalf's there, of course. And Bilbo tries to sneak off with the ring in his pocket. And this is the first time, as like a reader, the ring as like something that has power we see. And it's sort of vague. I mean, it's like impossible to read this section now knowing the ring is controlling him, trying to get him back to Sauron. but I think the scene is really good. Like, the after all, why shouldn't I keep it? It's like, it's mine, and he explodes at Gandalf, and Gandalf's like, I'll kill you. Like, I could kill you. It would be the least hard thing I've had to do today is kill you.
It'd be really interesting to like read it and not know what the ring is. Like, not like, oh, I like The Hobbit, let's read this Lord of the Rings thing, because like it's impossible to know now, and like having seen the movie, like what
and
that
just
experience
Bilbo
would be
act like this. You're like, what the fuck? That's not my Bilbo Baggins, goddammit. But Bilbo does leave, and he does leave the ring with Frodo. And then 17 years go by.
Yeah, that's a lot of time between the first and the second chapter.
Yeah,
in the movie, it's like the next day, right?
Yes, yeah. Or that's what it seems like. You know, Gandalf goes and gets captured by Sauron and whatever. And we see all that in the movie, but at no point is there like 17 years. There's like no, they never actually say that in the movie.
Well, I had forgotten that. I'd forgotten that like that's why he doesn't meet them throughout this whole journey.
Yeah, but he thinks he's got an inkling about the ring. Gandalf does, so he leaves to go be a history nerd and study a bunch of bullshit. And then 17 years later, he kicks open the door to Frodo's house, Bag End, and takes his precious gold ring and throws it in a fire.
Look at the letters. Look, I knew it.
And it is confirmed that it is not only a ring of power, but probably and deeply, unfortunately, the one ring to rule them all, if you will.
And then there's a big info dump.
Yes, there's big
with everything you need to know.
There's big lore that is seen at the beginning of the movie with with Isildur and Isildur's folly and all that.
Yeah, how the ring like went from Sauron, and then who killed Sauron, and then like the ring got lost, and then Gollum found it, and all that stuff. And Gandalf has spent 17 years trying to figure this all out.
Yep. And they're talking, and Frodo notices that he can't hear Sam, his gardener, cutting the leaves anymore, which I really love. And then Gandalf rips him into pulls him from the window into the house, and it's Samwise Gamgee, and he's been eavesdropping.
I'm a little sad that Gandalf doesn't throw around the hobbits a little more, because they're very small. And I would do that all the time if I lived with hobbits. I just pick them up and move them.
You're going over here now. Just put them in funny little places. And he forces Sam Gamgee. I love this part. Sam Gamgee realizes he's going to go see the elves, and then he immediately bursts into tears because he's going to leave. I love Sam Gamgee. God damn it. He's such
Sam loving the elves was like, I'm like, oh, Sam. That was another big moment where I'm like, oh, I see why people like these books.
Yeah. Yeah, I love
they're
that.
not like lame and weird.
No.
They're just like, oh, it's like very charming.
Yeah. So here's their big plan. Gandalf's like, I gotta go again. You've got to leave by the fall. And Frodo's like, I'm going to procrastinate as much as humanly possible before I have to leave. And now, maybe you can help me, Danylo. I've always thought Frodo's plan is stupid. He's going to walk with his friends, all the way to the place where he's moving, and then just wait till they leave, and then he's gone. They're gonna go back to the house and just realize he's gone. It was never.
I wonder if it delay. In my mind, so the plan was to Gandalf was like, oh, if you just leave right now, people would be suspicious, and then the word might get back that you left, and you'd be easily tracked or something. Right?
Yeah.
So Gandalf's like, okay, what you're going to do is move across to the next state over.
Yeah, pretty much.
And so you're going to sell Bag End to the Sackville Bagginses, the SBs, as they're referred to, which sounds like a slur, some sort of swear of some kind. I feel like it's short for son of a bitch, right? The SBs.
He's cute, there's no cursing in this book, but he does what he can.
Yeah, and then so he's going to move to another place, and then when he gets there, he's going to wait a day and then leave from there, because I guess leaving from a place you just moved to is more mysterious.
Well, I guess the plan is to get it to Rivendell. And, we haven't read this part yet, but turns out that Rivendell meeting doesn't go the way everybody thinks it's going to go, and I guess all the hobbits have to go further than they thought, meaning all the way. That was never the original plan, I don't think.
Was the original plan really just like, hey, get it to Rivendell, and then
Elrond will tell you what to do? Yeah, but then Elrond's like, you gotta buy it. I've got bad news, buddy. So they leave. I like this. There's a moment in the Shire though where who's he talking to? The tally, is it the tally man, or is it Samwise's father? Somebody overhears a conversation with like the creepiest man of all time asking questions. About Baggins. Yeah, which I love. One of the Nazgul, one of the Black Riders, is there. I like how talkative the Black Riders are in this. They're like little creepy like freaks. I don't know. They're talking to everyone. They're knocking on doors. They're just asking questions.
And no one is like too concerned. Like, that was weird.
Yeah. And like the way they're described later, the way they move and like they're almost like bug-like.
They're like Dementors.
Yeah. And they're just like, hey, do you know where Frodo is? And he's like, nope, haven't seen him. And nobody really cares. It's very good.
And then like several days later, someone's like, yeah, there's some guy was like asking about you. He was like, can you describe him? Oh, he was the scariest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I liked how the now I get why people like the Shire, because in my movie only brain it's all just Hobbiton and Hobbit holes, but like, oh, there's distinct little areas where the people are different and different families are there. And I like the description of what's the place that they go to where Merry and Pippin are from? Brandy
Buck. It's like the brand. Oh shit.
Whatever, and then like it's described as they have like the manor and like the families have lived there forever, and it's like the Lord of Brandywine or something.
Yeah,
I loved all that.
Yeah, I know, and like they don't all live in holes. Like there are houses, but they're like one story, which I think is funny. You get a lot. I mean, obviously, right? It's a book, but the whole place. It's obviously very well thought out, the Shire and all the surrounding areas, and you really get a sense of them, because we talked about this in The Hobbit. It feels like they take one step and they're in fucking Mirkwood, it's like, what the... But in this...
Or like in the middle of a paragraph, they're like, and 2 days passed, and then Gandalf showed up, and you're like, whoa.
But you really get everything in every like step of the journey, and I think it's because they're constantly being waylaid by... some danger, which it wasn't really happening to the hobbits. Like they're being hunted by the Nazgul, and so they have to take alternate routes, and they get lost, and they go on wacky adventures.
And I like that like they aren't even sure like what it is. They just sort of know like, oh, that's not good. Yeah. And like Gandalf like won't tell them, because if he does, they'll be like more scared and might like make another mistake or something. And so like, it's this weird thing where, like, as a reader, you're like, oh, this is not good. And they're all sort of, I mean, they're, like, worried about it, but, not as worried as, not as worried as I would be if I were in that situation.
Yes. They're brave. They're so brave. And that's something I love. I love how brave they are in the face of the Black Riders. Mm-hmm. They're
really... like, okay, we'll do what we have to do, and we're just going to keep going.
Yeah, it's awesome. So Frodo's moving to Crick Hollow, and he's taking Sam Gamgee, who knows the truth and is going to go with him to see the elves, and Peregrine Took is also coming, but he thinks that he's just helping his friend move, except he really doesn't. He actually does know about the ring, because Sam told him.
I love all the stuff that, it's revealed after he moves that all his friends have known about this the whole time, have been talking about it to each other. Yeah. And he's, like, sad, but also he thinks it's really funny.
Yeah, he's, like, understandably like, what the fuck? Like, I thought I was being, like, secretive.
And that's when I'm like, oh, they're friends. It's not like...
Yeah.
Because it's weird. In the movie, it feels like, Merry and Pippin are kind of dumb. And then Sam is, like, his servant. And you're like, this is a weird dynamic. Yeah. But, like, in the book, you're like, oh, it's a little bit... It's more and different than that. And that sort of comes across in the scenes that are cut for the movie, I think by necessity and probably for the best, but I liked it more in the book. It just made me like the main characters better.
Right. So they eventually get to Farmer Maggot, Okay, they're being chased by the Black Riders, and then they find all the elves, and they meet Gildor and Glorion.
And Sam is just like crying the whole time.
Yeah.
He's like, wow, the elves.
Yeah, it's awesome.
They're even better than I could imagine. I love that. I like started tearing up, and I'm like, based on what I know what's coming in this story, I'm like, oh no. Oh no.
Yeah. It starts out very innocent. Gildor and they do sort of have like a weird dark conversation where he's like you know it's following you, right? And then he's like, no. And he's like, Gandalf didn't fucking tell you? And he's like, I'm not gonna tell you. He's like, you're gonna poop your fucking pants if I tell you what's happening to you. I love that. And he's like, okay. And they're like, what'd you and Gildor talk about? And Free's like, I don't fucking know. Like, he's the most confusing.
Telling me anything.
Yeah, it's frustrating. But they eventually get to Farmer Maggot, who in the movie is a mean old man, but is actually really nice in the book. He's a great guy. Okay, he invites him in.
Best chapter name ever, I have to say, called A Shortcut to Mushrooms. Yep. I thought that was lovely and sweet.
Yeah, it is.
That doesn't come across in the movie as like, I was very charmed by everything.
Oh yeah, it's super charming because it's like fairy tale. So we meet.
Yeah.
So Farmer Maggot, this is all good stuff, you know. We meet Farmer Maggot. They have dinner. They was like, oh, I'll take you to Buckleberry Ferry. They get a little scared by Mary, but it's just Mary. It's not really a dark rider. It's all good. And then they finally get to the house at Crick Hollow, and Frodo's like, guys, I have to be honest with you. I'm leaving. And they're like, yeah, we know when we're coming with you. We're going to take you the whole way, which I love. I love that part. I love that they're in it.
Yep.
After Crick Hollow, they are again waylaid by Black Riders, and Frodo's like, oh, I can't wait. Is it Mary? One of them is like, no, you idiots. We'll just go through the old forest. It's right there. Such an easy shortcut.
And isn't Mary like, I know it. I've been in there once or twice.
Yeah.
I can get us through it. Yeah. That was so much of this part I did not expect to be just the plan for taking a path.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, we can't take the road because we could be seen on the road. Let's take the shortcut. And it's like, oh, let's go south of this hill, and we know that the river's there. And it didn't feel super slow because like the way I feel like he like paced out like the sense of threat of like there could be a Black Rider around any corner, you know?
Yeah.
I really like that, but it also makes sense why they cut this out of the movie because it's basically a hike.
Yeah, but Old Man Willow, Danylo. Here we meet Old Man Willow and Tom Bombadillo, who we will talk extensively about. I just wanted to say quickly, there's this let me see her name. Oh yeah, Jenny Turner. Okay, so in 2001, a scholar named Jenny Turner wrote that the Lord of the Rings, quote, was suitable for vulnerable people. You can feel secure inside it, no matter what is going on in the nasty world outside. The merest weakling can be the master of this cozy little universe. Even a silly, furry little hobbit can see his dreams come true. And she talks about Frodo's 5 homely houses, which is an idea of like an adventure in this book and how it's constructed, which I think is really interesting because I think the reason that this is so effective is because it really, now I can't believe I'm about to say this, it truly is the Dark Souls of fantasy novels. Now, if you'll let me. So imagine that the homely houses are like bonfires, right? Mm-hmm. We have Bag End to Crick Hollow. There's conflict that happens while they're still in the Shire with the Black Riders, but they get to Crick Hollow and then everything is good. So like they've reached. That's 2 homely houses, Bag End and Crick Hollow. The third one being...
Wait, can I interrupt you?
Yeah, sorry.
But for anyone who's listening to this and doesn't know, a bonfire is a checkpoint in Dark Souls, in the video game Dark Souls.
I think everybody listening to this podcast knows, whether or not they played it before, they know.
A fantasy podcast, reading Lord of the Rings, but just in case.
So then there's always an incredibly safe place, an incredibly dangerous place, and then an incredibly safe place. So there's a charitable like rising action, climax, falling action 5 separate times throughout this first book, because in part like this was like the first part of the first book. And I think that like the action that happens does get more and more dangerous. We have the Shire, with a couple interactions with the Black Riders. We have the Old Forest, where 2 of them almost die because a tree kills them. The Barrow Downs, which we'll talk about, obviously. And then Weathertop and the flight to the Ford, which is, Frodo, the main character, almost dies in that. So we get, like... And then there's, like, a reset. And this is also...
And then they end in Rivendell.
Right. And that's also, thinking about it in, like, a analysis sense, it's then interesting to call it the last homely house of Elrond, because it literally, on Frodo's journey, is, unfortunately, the last time they will be guests anywhere.
Well, I have something to piggyback off of that. I thought it was super interesting because, like what we talked about last time with, Tolkien's conception of like the dis catastrophe and the catastrophe, where like random things, which I think to modern readers reads like a Deus Ex Machina, like, oh, they're in trouble and in danger, and then something comes along and saves them and takes them to some perfectly safe place. I think if you know that that's sort of the conception of the storytelling, that makes it a lot easier to read, because you're not trying to put some like framework of this is a modern like thriller action movie story. And sort of coupled that with the idea that it was really kind of, I don't know, almost powerful to read that like in these safe places, like you have no like sense that it would be unsafe. Like there's no like, oh, like they're fine with Tom Bombadil. Like it's like a feeling thing, and that like these are places where like, oh, they can like enjoy the pleasures of life. They can like have a bath. They can like have a meal, and there's no sense like that's bad or like they should feel guilty or like that will lead them to be in more danger. Which in like you'd think in like modern writing, it's like, oh, you have to surprise the protagonists when they're least expecting it, and that's when danger strikes, But, like, this story doesn't operate on that level, and I really liked that.
Because even when it does, which it only happens one time in this section, they have Aragorn, the most capable person of all time, like, there to protect them. So the Old Forest, Old Man Willow, which is just a tree, almost kills Merry and Pippin.
Yeah, he tries to eat them. He like absorbs them. I was like, all right, well, this isn't in the movies.
No. They've actually talked about this. I think there's an interview with Peter Jackson who was like, I am really bummed we couldn't put Old Man Willow into it.
I was reading that and I'm like, he's a tree and they try to light it on fire, and then there's a guy. I'm like, pump this shit straight into my veins. I love this nonsense.
It's awesome. And then we meet a man whose coat is blue and his boots are yellow, baby. Tom Bombadil enters the story. Danilo.
And he has a song.
Oh, he does have a song. Did you read the song?
I did read the song.
Yes.
This whole section, I'm better about the songs. I've been reading the songs. I may have zoned out in the middle of the songs and not gone back to read the parts I zoned out on, but I'm getting better.
Yeah, that's good. Good. I'm glad to hear it. Danilo, this is your first experience with everybody's favorite Lord of the Rings character, Tom Bombadil. What did you think of this whole chapter?
Unironically amazing. I loved every second of it.
I love it too. He's a big weird freak.
It's the whole, like, I think once you're clued into, like, oh, this is like sort of an episodic fairy tale, and so you can sort of enjoy the sections as they come and all like their fun and weirdness, and like this was great. And he's looking after some river spirit named Goldberry.
Yeah, his trad wife.
Yeah. And Tom Bombadil's like, I don't know, I'm just always here. I'm the warden of this forest, and my songs can fix everything.
Yeah. I like the most famous thing I think that happens in this section is that he's like, you mean this ring? And he's just like holding it, and it has
it doesn't affect him. And he like looks through
anything.
It. Amazing. Yeah. Love
he's
it.
He's like hiding it, and he's like, oh, it's behind here. I love it's described. I just have to to read this now. It happens in the Council of Elrond, but Frodo's like, they're like, what do we do with the ring? And Frodo immediately, he's like, let's just go back and give it to Tom Bombadil. And Gandalf says that the ring has no power over him, and so that he would just like lose it. He would just, and then the bad guys would find it, which is very funny. What do you think? Like, why is this here? It is not, aside from being like a fun adventure,
so
it is not important.
You mentioned something just offhand on the last episode where you were like, oh, you know, thinking about Tolkien and nature and like the relationship of, you know, humans and living beings to nature. And like, I was really sort of clued into that as part of the worldview, especially in this part, because there's lots of descriptions about nature, and the environment of the Shire is really, you know, fleshed out and described in the different parts of it. And then when they leave, like, there's all these descriptions of nature and stuff. And I think at like Tom Bombadil as a character who almost like perfectly like personifies being like at one with nature. Like, he has his own little area that he's like the total master of, but he like doesn't try to impose his will on things or control things. And, you know, the ring doesn't bother him because he's sort of like a Buddha. He's like enlightened. Yeah. He doesn't need anything more. He's just has his little area and it's all fine, and he's like at one with nature, basically.
Yeah, there's a
and he has a trad wife, River Spirit.
Yeah. There's a scholar. Her name is Verleen. There's a lot of Tolkien scholars out there. If you, but Verleen Flieger, I think is how you would say it. I don't actually know, but she says like Tom Bombadil, just like what you were saying, Danilo, because he is in tune with nature. If you think of like Sauron's antagonist, if Sauron is the protagonist of his story, then the ultimate antagonist couldn't be Aragorn, like the person he would fight on the battlefield, or Gandalf, the person like he is spiritually at war with, but it would have to be Tom Bombadil, because he's just like lives as one with nature and seems to be some sort of like Dutch folklore immortal being.
Right.
And his indifference to an object that only exists to dominate and control other things has no, like, he doesn't care about that.
Yeah, it's like not like it doesn't even enter into his worldview as something to do or want or anything.
Yeah. So like, if the whole world were to be, Sauron would never be able to, aside from like killing him outright, be able to can like make Tom Bombadil part of his army, or like enslave him somehow. And I think putting a character like this might, at first, like, if you don't think about it, it might seem really bizarre to just have this character right at the pretty much at the beginning of the first book, and to have him have sort of like indescribable power over the most powerful object of all time, and then just sort of move on. But I think it's a good, like, I don't really think it's out of place, because you're establishing that no, there is like an unassailable like thing to strive for in this world, and it is Tom Bombadil.
And you're like thinking of Tom Bombadil the whole time, or like, oh, does this world have other Tom Bombadils? Because it's so random, you know. And so like, oh, it's possible that there's all these little pockets of like beings like Tom Bombadil in this world.
There might be more. Yeah.
And so it like sort of adds that level of it. Yeah, which I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I was expected it to be like the prologue, where people talk about it like it's, we're on this great adventure, and then you hit this thing like a brick wall, and it's like, why are we here? But like, I did not have that experience at all.
No, I think it's great.
Now when they sing a whole song about taking a bath, now that, I mean,
hell yeah, that's awesome.
I read the part and I wanted to take a bath. So
yeah, there you go, it worked.
It worked. He's trying to get people to take baths.
Him and his trad wife are they're like swingers. They're trying to get you, like, maybe like, we saw you from across the bar in Bree. You want to come back to our vibe? We like your vibe, man. My coat is blue and my boots are yellow.
You know what that means.
You know what they say about big boots, right?
You know what they say about yellow boots?
This is my Tom Bombadil impression. Yeah, you know, he sounds like Putty from Seinfeld.
You know what they say about yellow boots? Yellow penis.
I have a yellow penis. So they leave the refuge of Tom's house, and Tom Bombadil's like, okay, I live right next to Big Graveyard. Don't go into it.
They're going to try to steal you.
Yeah. They're going to try to take
Walk
your soul.
quick.
Yeah, just run right through it. And they instantly get lost in the fog and fall asleep and wake up. And I think this is the part where it no longer feels like a children's book anymore.
Yeah, that part in the fog was like scary. I'm
Yeah.
like, what? And like, wait, he's alone? Like, as someone who's never like read this before, I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, it's really, the first time I read this, I was like, holy where the fuck is this? Like, because he's like yelling for his friends and nobody's answering, and then it finds them like they wake up, and they've been like stun locked on the ground, dressed in like
some lich has cast hold person on them.
Yes, exactly. No, that's exactly what's happened. And they're dressed in like ancient like knights garb, like staring at the ceiling, and then like a big scary hand holding a sword is gonna like slit all their throats. But then the power of music.
Well, Frodo like finds his like dagger or whatever, and like
he hits
cuts the hand, and he's like, "All right, Tom Bombadil's nearby," and he sings a little song, and Tom Bombadil appears and saves them all.
Yeah, again, a creature of unassailable good, just using the power of his being there to get rid of something evil and twisted. Yeah, so then we get to Bree.
Well, and then they're like, and then Tom Bombadil's like, maybe I should have helped you a little bit more.
Oh, yeah.
And he like takes them a little further and gives them a pony who is my favorite fantasy character of all time, Fatty Lumpkin. I'm all in on Fatty Lumpkin, the boss horse.
Yep, Fatty Lumpkin, baby.
Oh my god, I just love that. Fatty Lumpkin and Thank You Very Much are like my two favorite parts of this. It's amazing.
There's some good names. There's some great names in here. So they get to the village of Bree, and they're hanging out, they're drinking in a bar, and they're like, I guess before they get to Bree, there's a mean old man who doesn't let him in, and he's like, they're like, what's your name? And Frodo's big ruse is that his last name is Underhill and not Baggins. As if they're looking for 4 hobbits. Like, it can't be those hobbits. His name's Underhill. Like, they don't.
Well, because
they're like evil creatures. Think like, they don't care about last names.
Yeah, the only thing the Black Riders know is the name Baggins, but that's what they think they do. So like, if we just don't tell them that, then we're fine.
He's got to know they're hobbits too, though. They've got to. They've seen them. They like ran away from them. Anyway, they eventually get let in, and the town of Bree is like, I don't know, the vibes are off, but the innkeeper's a nice guy, and they're getting drunk.
It's a D&D town.
It is a D&D town.
It's cool how it's described how like the hobbits and the men and the dwarves like live in peace, and the hobbits are a little different, and they all like talk to each other, and there's like some infrastructure made for the hobbits because like there's a hobbit population. I thought that was really cool because in the movie they're in Bree for like 2 seconds.
Yes,
there's a whole innkeeper, and then there's another guy, and then there's this guy Bill who's like mean to them, and there's a whole subplot where they're like, whoa, we can't stay in the room that's by the windows, and all that stuff.
There's a moment as soon as they enter, like a scary shadow climbs over the wall after them. But turns out it's not really a scary shadow. But
the coolest guy of all time.
It sure is. So they're drinking in the bar and they're hanging out. And Bilbo and Frodo goes, "Hey, innkeep, who's that sexy king in the corner over there?" And he's like, he's badass. He's the coolest literary character ever. He's the Greek ideal of the perfect man. His name is Strider. We call him.
And he's a ranger.
Right.
That is the D&D class that he chose.
Yes. His name is Strider / Aragorn. His class is ranger, but he doesn't have an animal companion, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And then Frodo says, "Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll do magic. I'll tell a big story and then do magic. Because Pippin, they're all getting drunk and Pippin's like, yeah, I know Baggins. He's like, yeah, he's right there. And then in order to distract from this, Frodo stands up on the table and starts giving speeches, and they're all hanging out. And then catastrophe strikes. Danylo, would you like to describe what happens to Frodo Baggins here?
Doesn't Frodo fall? He's like dancing and then he falls, but then like accidentally the ring slips on and he vanishes. And then everyone's like, oh, these hobbits are magic and we hate them now. Yes.
And he backs up invisibly, he backs up under the table and takes his ring off, and Aragorn's like, are you fucking stupid? Or I could be mixing it up. I think that's what happens in the movie.
When the party stops, like that's a total buzzkill. Like when one guy disappears, it's like the party's over. It's gotten too crazy. And Frodo tries to brush it off. He's like, I'm just over here. Yeah. And they're like, shut up. You still disappeared. Shut up. You vanished.
And I think when that happens, like a couple suspicious characters leave the inn because they're described as being suspicious, and you as the reader can probably infer they're going to inform some dark servant.
Because it's implied or said that, like, oh, the Black Riders have been here, like, asking about things or, like, asking certain people about things and offering rewards, right? Or something like that?
Yeah, and there's like, the newcomers. There's, like, one particularly shifty one among them that is described that disappears after everything goes down.
The other Bree people, like, don't know super well, right?
Yeah. And so they get Aragorn takes Frodo up to his hotel room, and they have a conversation.
He's like, "Trust me, please trust me."
Yeah, I love this part. So Aragorn is trying to convince Frodo that he's on the level, and then the rest of the hobbits come in, and Sam's like, "Oh, how can we trust you?" And Aragorn's like, again, just poor Sam. He's like, I could kill you. I would have done it already. Like, if I were an agent of evil, you would all be dead. Like, his sword's like already in his hand.
And then the innkeeper comes in with the innkeeper was constantly talking about, like, there's something I thought I should remember to tell you, and it was important. Ugh. And he's always described as, like, talking and distracted. And then isn't it at that moment he comes in, he's like, oh, that's right, I have a letter for you from Gandalf. And like, oh, come on, dude.
It's the letter identifying, I feel like not everybody, I think I have it marked, I feel like a lot of people don't realize this is from The Lord of the Rings. It's the all that is gold does not glitter, not all those who wander are lost. That's from Lord of the Rings, baby. So if you see a bumper sticker that says not all those who wander are lost, and what do? They hike? Yeah, whatever, dude. But this is I like this passage because it's supposed to identify Strider as a friend, and the ends. This poem is this is awesome. I'm just going to read the whole thing.
Great.
Well, I'm going to read the letter, actually. I think this is all good. He was supposed to give it way before
in the summer. And in it Gandalf's like, don't wait until the fall. Yeah. Go now.
The letter reads, Dear Frodo, bad news has reached me here. I just say very good. I must go off at once. You had better leave Bag End soon and get out of the Shire before the end of July at the latest. It's like November. I will return as soon as I can, and I will follow you. If I find that you are gone, leave a message for me here if you pass through Bree. You can trust the landlord. Oh, Mr. Butterbur. That's right.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
You may meet a friend of mine on the road, a man, lean, dark, tall, by some called Strider. He knows our business and will help you. Make for Rivendell. There I hope we may meet again. If I do not come, Elrond will advise you. P.S. Do not use it again, not for any reason whatever. Do not tread by night. And then it says P.P.S. Make sure that his real name is Strider. There are many strange men on the roads. His true name is Aragorn. And then he writes this poem. All that is gold does not glitter, not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither, deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken, a light from the shadows shall spring, renewed shall be blade that was broken, the crownless again shall be king. Which is just fucking awesome.
It's fucking epic.
And not so, they're like, you're the king? You're the king of Gondor? Not. Huh?
And he's like, guys.
He's like, this broken sword? I'm just kidding. He's like, I'm just messing around.
He's like, I'm Aragorn, son of Arathorn.
This is Anduril, the Flame of the West. No big deal. It's broken right now.
But it's not going to be broken for very long, so don't worry about it.
So he's like, all right, we got. Before they leave, there's a sort of like a what's going on in the rest of the world part where the Black Riders are officially fed up being nice, and they they creep into the house. Was it Farmer Maggot's house? I can't remember. Somebody's house, and they're like, "Where's Frodo Baggins? I want to know where he is now." And then he sprints out the back door and sounds a big alarm. It like shouts through a horn and is like, "Fire! Awake! There's enemies here! Awake!"
And for all these, I mean, we can make this side note now. I mean, these are old books, and he was an old British man. It's very funny. They always describe them as the black men. Just the black men. That black man was being evil, or that black man was looking suspicious.
Yeah, there's I think my favorite...
They're dressed in black.
Yes, that is important. They're dressed in black. But there's a lot of like sentences where it's like, queer black people were here. Right, and it's like, what? Huh?
The black men outside were very queer. You're like, oh boy.
We see it in the movie. This is the bit in the movie that I think I like how the fake out is actually also in the book, but where the Nazgul did find like where their original bedroom was, and like Aragorn had set up like a funny like Ferris Bueller asleep.
Oh yeah, that's
trap. Right. And the Nazgul fucked him up and like stabbed it, and then realized that they weren't there, and so they left. But
they decided not to check the rest of the building where they were, and just left.
Yeah, they just had to leave. But they scared all the ponies away. Danylo, Patty Lumpkins.
I am more invested in all these ponies because they talk about like where are they getting the ponies and who in town has the ponies and what their names are.
It's
and
important.
How they're feeling.
Yep.
And the pony lore, A+.
Old Bill Ferny is convinced to give them a pony. He's like, fine, you can have my weak, dying old pony, but it's actually not weak.
But then didn't they still pay like 3 times over market price for it or something like that?
They did. They paid a lot of money, and then Mr. Butterbur gave Sam or Mary a bunch more silver pieces, and he's like, I'm ruined. But he felt bad because he lost the horses.
There's like a paragraph right after that, which is, it turns out all the ponies ran away, and then they sort of wandered back, and then Mr. Butterbur got them all back. So really, he was up on the transaction.
Yeah, but these idiots were long gone then, those fucking morons.
That's Tolkien saying, like, just be nice to people. It'll be fine. Just be nice to people.
Strider, also known as Aragorn, leads he knows the wilds, and so he's like, you guys got to stop taking the highway. They're just going to find you. I'll lead you through the wilds. We're going to go to a place called Weathertop. They're like, why? And it's like, because we can see we can camp there, and we can see everywhere. So we can see if a bunch of people dressed in dark cloaks at nighttime sneak up on us. Wrong. Idiot. This guy's a ranger? Give me a fucking break. Danylo, would you like to describe the cool thing that happens at Weathertop to our heroes?
So they get to Weathertop, and it's a place where you stick out like a sore thumb. And then they're standing around for a long time, and then the Nazgul see them.
Yep, naturally, duh.
And then Strider's like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have stood up that long. He like actually says it.
I know, I love it. It's literally just a big tower in a field. Like, literally, that is what it is.
But they find like some runes that maybe imply that Gandalf was here, and like a camp. Yeah. And they can't go on further, so they camp there.
And Frodo also sees a wizard duel happen in the distance.
There's like lights, like fireworks or something.
Which is
like lights in the...
Yeah. It's Sauron and Gandalf fighting each other, but he doesn't know that yet.
Sauron or Saruman?
Sorry, Saruman. Saruman and Gandalf. So the Nazgul, they show up. Uh-oh. And
to their bonfire on top of the hill in the big field.
Yeah, they did light a huge fire. Well, they got to cook, potatoes, fresh crispy bacon. That's that part. Fresh crispy bacon. Put it out, you fools! Put it out. they make their way up Weathertop, and Strider, he fights literally 9 Nazgul off by himself. And like, this is your first, if you don't know anything, this is your first inclination where you're like, oh, this guy is not messing around. This guy's the coolest guy ever.
Or like the Nazgul aren't messing around. Like they will kill people. They're just not.
Yeah.
Because some of the time it's like, oh, they're scared by fire, so like we'll be fine. Like they're sort of seen as, you know, weak, and they sort of are when they're alone. But it's, I don't know, like the threat level of the Nazgul is very like weird sort of throughout.
Yeah.
I don't know if that maybe like it just reflects the Hobbit's view of them, or like, you know, what sort of the source of their power is. Like, because if it's just one by themselves, like they're also like kind of cowards, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And this is also, you know, before Frodo gets stabbed here by a Morgul blade.
Because he puts on the ring. He's like, oh, I have to put on the ring. He like feels this huge compulsion for them to put on the ring, and he like hears a voice in their head, and he's like, oh, if I do it, I can escape. But instead, he like sees their true form, and they can see him even better, and they stab him in the shoulder, just like the movie.
Because the ring doesn't turn you invisible; it shifts you into like a different plane, where like
astral plane.
Yeah, well, yeah, pretty much. where the like whites and these like spirits can see you more clearly. That's why the ring is constantly wanting to be put on, so it could be found easier.
Sure.
Yeah, so he gets stabbed, unfortunately, and it's like not. It's described as like not like maybe how it would normally feel to be stabbed. Like,
it's like cold. It's like searing cold.
And then, yeah. So I mixed it up. He gets stabbed, and then he like Frodo feels like the compulsion to pray to like elder gods. He's like, oh, Elbereth Gelthoniel.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work, and then. Right before he passes out from the pain and the ring falls from his finger, that's when Aragorn shows up with a flaming piece of wood and kicks ass. There's still... Oh, this is very good. When Frodo wakes up, the first thing he says is, what has happened? Where is the Pale King? Which is like... Can you imagine? You're like, what?
Whoa, buddy.
Yeah. Gotta get this guy some water and a Pedialyte, man. This guy is fucked up. That's what every time I wake up hungover. What has happened? Where is the Pale King?
Well, he does have sort of scary dreams throughout this section, which I don't think happens in the movie, and like that was very concerning. Like he's like, I had a dream that I was standing on top of the hill, and like I felt something rush by me in the dark, and then I woke up, and you're like, oh my god.
Yeah. Strider uses an herb, Ethelos, and he's like, this is gonna help, but you're gonna be dead unless we can get you to heal you with elven magics. And so they hurried to Rivendell, which suddenly seems a lot closer than it did before, but whatever.
They run into the trolls from The Hobbit.
They do, yes, they pass the
stone trolls.
And they're pursued again by, of course, the Black Riders. All of them in tow, but thank God they meet some dude named Glorfindel.
Who's an elf?
He's like an elf who is in, you know, when we read the Silmarillion, we will see Glorfindel again. But this is the last we see of Glorfindel in the Lord of the Rings. He is like, oh, I'll just take him. I got a way cooler horse than you. I'm way
Elrond sent a bunch of us out to like find you guys. So
yeah, and Glorfindel's the one who found him. And they pursue past the river Bruinen, I think. Yeah, Bruinen, and Elrond summons a bunch of sweet water to fuck up the Nazgul. Something I like is that the Nazgul have literally like comic book weaknesses: water, fire.
Rock, paper, scissors. Psychic damage.
Yeah, psychic damage. Necrotic damage. Poison ray. That is... The ring sets out. That is...
Yeah.
What we...
Yeah, they get drowned by the water, and it looks like horses, and...
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. That
is awesome. In the movie, it's the character Arwen who does it, which I guess makes more sense. But, hell no, it's Glorfindel in this one, baby.
And then Frodo sees that happen and then passes out.
Yep, and he dies, and he's not in the rest of the book, so which is a real shame. I am upset we didn't get to. We're so close to meeting the rest of the Fellowship, but we will talk about that next time. Your Gimlis, your Boromirs, your Legolas.
Yep. But we have to talk about the chapter Many Meetings.
That's true. We do have to talk about that chapter.
I have a lot to say about that chapter.
Oh, well then go ahead.
He wakes up. Frodo wakes up in Rivendell, and Gandalf is there, and all his friends are there.
Yeah.
And Bilbo is there, and they sing songs and make merry.
Do. Is this this is when they actually find out Gandalf's there.
Yep.
And he's like, yeah, so I guess I should probably tell you who the Black Riders are, huh? He's like, they're called the Nazgul. They're the 9 kings of men doomed to die.
He does another big info dump, and he's like, I won't tell you where I was now, but I'll just say I was captured.
Ooh.
Well, and then Bilbo's like, I would pay any amount of money Frodo is like, I'll pay any amount of money to see Bilbo again, and Gandalf's like, if only you could. And then like the next page, it's like, who's that old man in the corner? Bilbo.
Yeah, Bilbo looks fucked up. He doesn't look so
he's
good
really
now that he's
old.
in the ring.
Well, and I think this is when he has the jump scare in the movie where he's like, yeah. So he's like, Frodo shows him the ring, and like a shadow appears over Bilbo's face, and he looks super scary. And Frodo's like, I'll just put this away now, Grandpa. And they meet one of the dwarves. One of the dwarves is there.
Glowin is here.
Yeah, Glowin. And Frodo asks him, so what's new? And they're like, Bomber is so fat now that he can't even walk.
Yeah,
that's the big news from Under the Mountain.
And it's like, okay. We don't have anything else to talk about.
I also have to say, I'm so glad that you told me that Lake Town is also called Esgaroth, or I would have been so fucking lost.
Yeah, they do just say that.
They never make that explicit ever. I would have been like, was that a person? Is Esgaroth like a guy?
Danylo, I think in this chapter we also have our longest song.
Oh yeah, that's a long song.
It is a long song.
Sam improvises based off of nonsense. Whatever, is that the same one?
Is
that a different one?
Hang on, I have it here. It's Bilbo. Bilbo is like hanging out with the elves, and he's like chanting verses.
Yeah, and they're like, Bilbo's like, I've been working on this new one. Elves, do you want to hear it? And they're like, we'll always hear your songs, old man.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I've been working on this one with Strider, and like, could you tell who wrote which part?
I like this. This is exactly like what that scholar is talking about. Like, this chapter is just here because, like, oh man, remember all that crazy shit that just happened? Anyway, here's Glowin and Bilbo's singing songs, and all of our friends are back and they're healthy again.
Elrond seems nice.
He is nice.
Yeah. He comes across as mean in the movies.
Do you like how he's described as being the most handsome man of all time, and then they cast Hugo Weaving to play him? Okay.
Well, we do see Arwen, and she looks pretty similar to how she's described.
Yeah, Lady Arwen.
Although I had this issue with elves, like the way they're described, because we get them from like the Hobbit's perspective, basically. That like, I guess I sort of knew that they're like angels, basically, like aliens. But like in my head, like the movie, they had to be played by human beings,
right?
And unfortunately, and like for me, like that's like a limiting factor where like the way they're described in this book is like, oh, I see like what Tolkien's elves are now. It's not just Liv Tyler. No,
they're like they're like not. It's almost like they don't. It's not
like a pretty
here.
Lady,
No, they don't belong here. Like they actually don't. They're from a different entire place.
Right. Well, and then I love this was from earlier, but they like all the elves are like moving west. Like they're all traveling west to go back to where they come from.
The age of man is coming, the fourth age.
Mm-hmm. And it makes more sense to me reading that they're like otherworldly and don't belong here than it is like, and so then they wouldn't care what would happen to Middle Earth. Then like in the movies where like sort of on a gut level you're like, but you're all people, right?
Yeah.
So it sort of feels more fantasy-y in the book,
Yeah.
Like Hugo
like
Weaving cares about what happens to Earth, and I know that on a gut level, you know.
Yes. Nobody is as good enough of an actor to convince you they hate the Earth.
That they hate the Earth and are aliens. Like
Yes.
it's gonna look like a person.
But they do think the ring it might be a serious problem. They're like, uh-oh. Because we can't peacefully, we might be immortal, but if we get stabbed in the head by a evil god, we will die. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's it so far.
Yeah.
We have made it to the last homely house. Yeah, there's good stuff coming up. Council of Elrond is a long chapter, but I mean the rest of this book clips along. We get to talk about more the Mines of Moria next time.
Yeah,
which is very exciting.
Which I mean, I was just overall surprised. I expected this first half of this first book to be a slog because it's always been described as a slog, but I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, I think before they leave the Shire, if you're not already bought in, it does take like you do have to be like, okay.
Or if you're, like I said before, if you're waiting for like just the plot beats of like, where's the ring going? I'm waiting for my action sequences. Like, then I can see how it's not an enjoyable experience. But like, once you're clocked into like, the book's not strictly interested in that.
No,
you know, and so I think once you're clocked into like that's what the book the book isn't interested in that and like is interested in other things, I think it makes it a lot easier and more fun to read and just enjoy where they are in this adventure. And if it is a bonfire or a homely house, to be like, oh, this is fun and nice, and these people are able to like chillax for a bit. Yeah,
and don't worry, you know, sword fights, they're coming. Big battles and wars, they're coming. They're just not really in this one until the end of this book. Well, Moria too, I guess, but that's mostly a big creep. He kills an old man. Spoiler alert.
Those on the front page of the paper of Middle Earth. Big creep kills old man.
I think an interesting thing, like a Hobbitism, if you will, is that Gandalf disappears from this book and like leaves the hobbits to go on their own adventure and figure it out. But he comes back and is like obviously a main character. He dies, but comes back even then and is like in the books way more than he is in the Hobbit. He's a main fucking character. He's always with like Aragorn. And I think it almost feels like Tolkien's writing and is like, well, I need to get the uber powerful wizard out of the story or else there's no tension. And then it almost feels like he's like, no, there can still be tension even if there's this like powerful being. It just comes from like the things I've already set up. We haven't done this yet, but you've seen the movie. You know Boromir is like he wants that ring, baby. He wants it now. Yeah. And like there can be tension explored through there. It doesn't always need to be like, oh, there's a big troll. How are we going to defeat it? Like that's not really what the conflict of these books are. It's more like, I would say the conflict is always like, oh my God, I'm scared. How do I not be scared anymore? And that like that can mean a ton of different stuff. It means it ranges literally from like, oh, I'm nervous to talk to Farmer Maggot again to like I have to literally climb up Mount Doom on my hands and knees and throw a ring into a volcano. Like that is it. Like that is the bar for
that's
tension.
Super
in these
interesting.
novels, which I think is good. And then you can have like gods in your story because the gods can be, Gandalf gets scared. You know, it's the same.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Who is Sauron except Gandalf's Farmer Maggot?
Right. He is nervous to talk to Sauron. he was eating all Sauron's mushrooms.
And you know, at the end of the book, Sauron just says like, it's okay, dude, gives him a bunch of mushrooms.
I like how in this book, at least so far, Sauron, like imagine if I don't know, maybe your dad, you know, tomorrow is like, your guitar. He's like, you you probably shouldn't play that anymore. And then he disappears for 17 years. And then he comes back and he's like, so the devil is real, and that's his guitar.
No, don't give it to me. Because then the devil's going to come. I'm going to play it. If you give it to me, I'm going to play it and I'm going to kill you. And then your dad's like, okay, so I know a guy in Chicago. I have to go. I know a guy in Chicago. Walk to Chicago with the guitar, but don't play it.
Yeah, and it's like, well, why can't I fly to Chicago? And it's like, that is too obvious. The instrument will emit a sound up there. He'll be able to hear it. Holy shit!
He's on the plains. The devil controls the plains. He can see the plains.
Like the willingness of the hobbits to be like, okay, I guess, all right, okay, sure. Like there's, I really like how there's not. Sauron is such a vague threat, and yet really feels like pretty legit. In that he's like, if like Gandalf is scared of it, then you know it's bad.
He would be vague, like it's, you know, they talk about Mordor, and it's like, ugh, it sounds like murder.
Right.
So it's probably bad. And like that's the only emotional thing they have of it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's like the tough part about like these stories are such in the public consciousness that like it's almost impossible to go back and people be like, what? This ring? Huh? Oh, this might be a bigger deal that like, you know, like, because you know the scope of the story so well. It should be super interesting if someone has had that experience of being like, I don't really know anything about it, but I'm just going to read The Hobbit and then The Lord of the Rings and then be like, oh my God, they took it all the way to the mountain.
Like, can you imagine in the poem, one ring to rule them all, one ring to... That when it's like 9 rings for the mortal men doomed to die, and then Gandalf's like, it's the guys who've been following you. Can you imagine being like, oh shit!
I know, yeah.
Like, that's crazy. That is so cool to think about. And then late, like, you know what? I was going to spoil something, but I think it might just be in the book, so I'm not. But we'll talk about it.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
But there are other moments like that where that aren't in the movie, so you might not actually know, and then be like, oh shit! Like the world fitting. I don't know. I love it.
Well, I was surprised when I saw Glowin at Rivendell. I'm like, wait, who's this old dwarf? Wait, Gimli doesn't have white beard. Oh my God, it's Glowin! Hell yeah! I was surprised by Bilbo. I'm like, Bilbo's here!
I know, it's awesome. I love the fact that Bilbo's there and so old. That's such a shame. Because like, hobbits don't really live for that long.
Well, and I love the detail where Frodo, they were like, you know, anyone else, if they had a sliver of that blade in their shoulder, they would have died a long time ago, but you held out, Frodo. Yeah. And I'm like, aw, yay, that's awesome. My Frodo.
I know.
He's not annoying.
Frodo catches a lot of flack, but he got stabbed by a Morgul blade and survived. He's the ring bearer, man.
I get it in the books. People liking hobbits makes a lot more sense to me now. It's not,
they're stalwart little creatures, man. They got furry feet, which is a weird detail, but you know what? Whatever.
They can't just be a small person.
No, they gotta have furry fucking feet. I saw a funny TikTok about that. And it was like, they're brave, and by God, their feet. They're so big and hairy.
It's so they can walk quietly in the forest.
They can sneak up on you. You don't know they're there. Just something to look forward to. We will return to the Misty Mountains in the next part, and it is the sole reason why throughout my entire childhood I always thought the Misty Mountains and the Lonely Mountain were the same thing. Also, the Misty Mountains is also just in Faerun in D&D. It's just called the Misty Mountains. They just stole it. I just have to say
there's so many D&D things where like there's basically Mirkwood. I don't think it's even called Mirkwood, but it's like, oh, that's the wood that's thick with the spiders.
Yeah, it's, you know, what's funny is like, if you're gonna do that, like Middle Earth feels like wild, but if you can't. It feels like to just set like a. I've never understood the compulsion to just make your fantasy world just this elves, dwarves, and the forest.
And I think that's why going into this, I expected it to be more generic because, like, you know, this is where it all comes from. And so I expected this to feel more like D&D, just like a really basic D&D campaign. But, like, it's not. Like, it's a work of, dare I say, literature.
It sure is.
He's a good writer who wants to express certain things through this, and like he chose his story structure very specifically, like we talked about with like the fairy tales, and he has his own worldview on stories, and he's like a scholar of these sorts of things, and so it's very different than being like they drink metal.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And you know, unfortunately, like. All right, so you want to talk about fantasy world building? I mean, the prologue here is that's fantasy world building right there. That is like no story in just these like I wouldn't argue they're cool ideas, but they are ideas, and it's like it's all front loaded, and then there's like
it should be at the end.
Yes,
it really should be at the end.
Well, it'll be important at the end of the third book. To learn why the Shire has police. There's a famous part of there's a famous part of these novels that's not in the movie because it's incredibly dark and violent, and it's in the last book, and we'll talk about it. I actually don't remember if the Shire police are involved in it, but it's called the Scouring of the Shire is what it is called.
I've heard of it, and I've heard that. The two things I've heard that aren't in the book or that aren't in the movies but are in the book are the Scouring of the Shire and Tom Bombadil. So we've checked one off the list.
We have. They're at the beginning and the end.
I also wanted to say something. I don't know, like, I liked that Frodo is like not a chosen one. Like, for some reason, like, I don't know, I didn't make that connection, but for some reason, since this book is seen as sort of like the origin of fantasy tropes, like, you think of Frodo as being the chosen one to like destroy the ring. But no, it's really just like his grandpa happened to give it to him, you know, and he doesn't have any special powers.
No.
And everyone's just like, the only reason someone more powerful doesn't have it is because if they did, it would be bad.
Exactly. Like, that's why this is all the chapter, the Council of Elrond, but that's like why Aragorn isn't going to take it and why Boromir isn't going to take it. And it's why it just happens like the mind melting part of it takes longer for hobbits. So you have to do it.
And like, that's, I think, I don't know, that's like a deliberate storytelling choice that like says something about the story you're writing. And I don't know if like this story gets credit for that in like maybe not the popular imagination, because, you know, in the movies Frodo is the action hero of the action movie, even though he doesn't do any action, and it's kind of annoying. And so like in the book, that whole he's not the chosen one, he's just some random hobbit who has to like, she just has to do this,
right? He's the hero. He's not the chosen one.
Right.
The chosen one is Aragorn. Like, actually, literally. Like, destined to be the king again. And I like how it is a fascinating choice to not... I know this is like high concept. This is almost like a pointless track to go down, but it is an interesting choice to not make like Aragorn the main character, because I feel like any other writer makes Aragorn the main character.
Yeah, any other fantasy story, it's about Aragorn being like, hey, I'm supposed to be king. I'm going to go and be awesome and be king.
Yeah.
He's like Paul Atreides, basically, from Dune.
But it's like, no, let's make it about this little weirdo who's just like going to have a really hard walk. And it's like, what? And I mean, the way that the books will work is like, it will be sort of like every other chapter is with the other people sort of thing.
Okay.
Because they split up at the end of this novel. I
mean, I know this novel is called The Fellowship of the Ring, and flipping through it, the last chapter is called The Breaking of the Fellowship. So
unfortunately, they also, I think, never actually say we are now the Fellowship of the Ring. It's always the Company of the Ring, which I don't understand, but whatever. I'm
like
not British.
D&D.
Yes, just like D&D. Wizards of the Coast are a bunch of hack scam artists. They fooled everybody.
But hey, you know, where is Fatty Lumpkin in D&D. I want Fatty Lumpkin.
You could put him in it. You could make Fatty Lumpkin.
I might be starting a new D&D campaign with some friends, and so I might have a little pony and name him Fatty Lumpkin.
Very good, very good. I just have one funny thing to talk about here. There was, for a brief period of time, a Lord of the Rings musical. By all accounts, I believe, I could be wrong about this. Let me make sure I'm not wrong about this. Well, in 2006, and it was like the most expensive thing of all time. And so it closed instantly.
But it was open? It opened?
Yes. Yep, and people have seen it with their eyeballs, and they're all in it. Every character is in it. Like from Barley Man, Butterbird, your Bill Fernies to Gandalf and Aragorn. Everybody's in it.
What?
Yeah. And
that feels like a hoax.
There was in 2013, Playbill announced that the show would be revived for a world tour in 2015. The first location for the tour would have been in New Zealand, but the dates and other locations were never announced. It never opened. It was open in 2006. It closed in 2007.
There has to be a recording of it.
$30 million.
Oh my God.
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. The production began performances on February 4th, 2006. Had its opening in March 2006, and its final performance was September 3rd, 2006.
I mean, hey, that was a couple months. It's better than some music. Like, it didn't close the same weekend.
No. And a definitive mega musical. Time magazine called it ingenious, but the New York Times said it was largely incomprehensible.
Now, I would love to write something and put something up that the New York Times calls largely incomprehensible. I would take that as a huge compliment.
If it was $30 million. Absolutely.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I would kill to see it.
Lord of the Rings musical interviews from 2023 UK revival?
Yeah, they like scaled it down and did a 12-week run. So that doesn't, as far as I'm concerned, that doesn't count.
Doesn't count. All right.
Yeah, at the time it was the most expensive production ever.
That's crazy.
Well, that's part 1 of 2 of the Fellowship of the Ring. Mm-hmm. You can follow us at Hardcover Hooligans on your Instagram, your Facebook. You can email us at hardcoverhooligans@gmail.com if you have any questions. If you want to talk to me about the Noldor, just go ahead and shoot me an email. We can have a conversation about that.
I don't know what that means, but I'd say if you like the show, please tell your friends about it. Leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And we love you all.
We love you.
Should we have some sort of like, I don't know, tag out something?
Yes. Stay hard,
fun
everybody.
And clever to stay. Stay hard like my man Frodo.
Stay hard like Frodo, people. Peace out.